The words cut deeper than any blade the Chicago outfit ever wielded. No one will ever want you, Bianca. You are taking up space in a world that belongs to predators. He smirked, expecting tears. Instead, she packed her bags. And the untouchable Mafia boss lost his fucking mind. The Chicago winter was unforgiving, but it was nothing compared to the temperature inside the Costa estate. Dante Costa, the undisputed head of the Costa Syndicate, ruled the Midwestern underworld with an iron fist and a heart wrapped in razor wire. He controlled the ports, the illegal gambling rings, spanning from Illinois to New York, and the politicians who looked the other way. He was a man accustomed to absolute obedience, a predator in bespoke Italian suits who viewed empathy as a fatal flaw. Then came Bianca Ferraro. Bianca was not meant for the Mafia world. She was hired out of necessity. 6 months ago, Dante's brother and sister-in-law were gunned down in a rival hit, leaving behind their 4-year-old son, Leo. The boy had stopped speaking since the night of the murder, prone to violent night terrors that echoed through the cavernous halls of the Costa mansion. Nanny after nanny had quit, terrified of the silent, traumatized child and the heavily armed guards patrolling the grounds. Bianca was different. She was 24, with soft curves, thick thighs, and a warm, generous spirit that felt entirely alien in the cold, sterile environment of the Costa compound. She did not flinch when Dante's capos slammed their guns onto the marble kitchen counters. She did not lower her gaze when Dante walked into a room, radiating lethal authority. Instead, she focused entirely on Leo. With endless patience, gentle humming, and a deep, unyielding resilience forged from her own difficult upbringing in the gritty neighborhoods of the South Side, she coaxed the boy back to life. Dante hated how much he noticed her. He was a man who appreciated sharp edges and cold perfection. Bianca was soft, plush, and unabashedly genuine. She wore oversized sweaters and practical jeans, her dark hair often thrown into a messy bun. Yet Dante found his eyes lingering on the curve of her hips as she carried Leo up the stairs. He found himself standing in the shadows of the nursery doorway, listening to her read stories, his chest tightening with an emotion he refused to name. He resented her for making him feel human. He resented her for the way his blood heated when she defied his strict schedules to let Leo play in the snow. To cope with this unwanted obsession, Dante became merciless. He criticized her weight, her clothes, her background. He threw her softer nature in her face, trying to break the serene confidence she carried herself with. Bianca absorbed his barbed insults with a quiet grace that only infuriated him more. She knew what he was trying to do, and she refused to give him the satisfaction of breaking her. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday night. Dante was hosting a high-stakes sit-down in his formal dining room. The guest of honor was Brett Vogel, a vicious German-American crime lord who controlled the narcotics trade in Detroit. Vogel was a known sadist, a man who saw weakness in everyone and exploited it for sport. Dante needed to secure an alliance with Vogel to prevent a full-scale turf war over the northern smuggling routes. Dinner was tense. The air was thick with cigar smoke and veiled threats. Midway through the meal, the dining room doors pushed open. Bianca stepped in, her face flushed, holding a sobbing Leo. The boy had woken up from a horrific nightmare and broken away from her, running straight toward his uncle. The room fell dead silent. Vogel's cold eyes swept over Bianca, his lip curling into a predatory, mocking smile. He looked at Dante, then back at Bianca, assessing her fuller figure with blatant disrespect. "Is this the hired help, Costa?" Vogel sneered, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "Or is the great Don of Chicago running a charity for the unwanted?" Dante felt a primal, violent surge of protectiveness rip through his chest. He wanted to pull his side arm and put a bullet between Vogel's eyes for daring to look at her. But he was a Don first. The alliance was worth millions and the safety of his entire syndicate. He could not show weakness. He could not let Vogel know that this plus-sized nanny held any sway over his cold heart. So Dante did what he did best. He destroyed. Dante stood up, adjusting his cuffs, his face an emotionless mask. He looked at Bianca, his dark eyes devoid of any warmth. "Take the boy upstairs," he ordered, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "And learn your place. You are a glorified babysitter. Look at yourself, Bianca. You do not belong in this room. You do not belong in my world. Do you honestly think anyone here respects you? No one will ever want you. You are taking up space in a world that belongs to predators. Now get out of my sight." The silence that followed was deafening. Vogel laughed, a harsh, scraping sound. Dante kept his eyes locked on Bianca, expecting her to crumble, to cry, to run away in shame. He needed her to hate him so he could stop wanting her. Bianca did not cry. Her hazel eyes met his, and for the first time, the warmth in them was entirely gone. It was replaced by a hollow, chilling emptiness. She did not say a word. She simply picked up Leo, pressed his face into her shoulder, and walked out of the room with her spine perfectly straight. Dante felt a sickening drop in his stomach, a sudden, terrifying realization that he had pushed too far. But he forced himself to sit back down and pour another drink. When Dante woke up the next morning, the house was eerily quiet. He walked down to the kitchen, and expecting the smell of coffee and the sound of Bianca's soft laughter. Instead, he found his head of security, a hulking man named Enzo, holding a single piece of paper. "She is gone, boss," Enzo said quietly. "Left her keys and the phone you gave her on the counter." She packed her things and walked out the front gates at 3 in the morning. The words did not process immediately. Dante snatched the paper from Enzo's hand. It was a formal letter of resignation, perfectly polite, stating that her final paycheck should be deposited into an account for Leo's future college fund. She did not take a single cent of the generous severance he owed her. "Where did she go?" Dante demanded, his voice dangerously low. "We do not know. She caught a bus at the edge of the neighborhood. She paid in cash." "Find her," Dante roared, flipping the heavy mahogany kitchen table as if it weighed nothing. Glass shattered across the floor. "Find her right now. Put every man we have on the streets. Check the bus stations, the train terminals, the airports. If she leaves this city, I will put a bullet in your head myself." For 3 days, the Chicago outfit tore the city apart. Dante did not sleep. He barely ate. He sat in the nursery, holding one of Leo's stuffed animals, listening to the boy wail for his Bianca. The mansion felt like a tomb. Dante realized with sickening clarity that Bianca had not just been taking up space. She had been the only source of light in a world suffocating in darkness. His cruel words echoed in his mind, torturing him. He had thought her soft, weak. But leaving a billionaire mafia boss in the dead of night with no money and no protection? That took a kind of titanium strength he had never encountered. Meanwhile, Bianca was 70 miles away, living in a dilapidated motel in Gary, Indiana. She had known better than to stay in Chicago. Dante owned the police, the cameras, the streets. She had pawned her mother's gold necklace to afford a week's rent, planning to find a quiet job in a diner and disappear. She cried only once into a lumpy motel pillow, mourning the little boy she had come to love, and mourning the foolish, secret part of her heart that had fallen for the monster who owned him. But Dante was not the only one looking for her. Brett Vogel was a man who survived by finding leverage. During the dinner, he had seen the micro-expressions on Dante Costa's face. He had seen the way Dante's fists clenched when Vogel insulted the girl. Dante's harsh deal was a cover-up, and Vogel knew it. If Costa cared for the fat nanny, then the nanny was the key to bringing the Chicago syndicate to its knees. Vogel's network of drug pushers and informants was vast, operating in the gutters where Dante's men rarely looked. It took Vogel's crew 4 days to track the cash-paying, plus-sized woman who matched Bianca's description to the rusted doors of the Gary Motel. It was raining heavily when they came for her. Bianca had just returned from a nearby convenience store, carrying a plastic bag with bread and peanut butter. As she approached her motel room door, 2 massive men stepped out from the shadows of the stairwell. They wore leather jackets, their faces scarred and grim. "Miss Ferraro," the taller one said, a sinister grin splitting his face. "Brett Vogel sends his regards. You are coming with us." Bianca's heart hammered against her ribs. She was terrified, but the life she had lived before the Costa estate had taught her that freezing meant death. She did not scream. As the man reached for her arm, she swung the heavy plastic bag, aiming the thick glass jar of peanut butter squarely at his temple. It connected with a sickening crack. The man stumbled backward, swearing violently. Bianca dropped the bag and ran. She bolted through the rain-slicked parking lot, her lungs burning. But she was not a sprinter, and the heavy boots of the second thug pounded the pavement right behind her. He tackled her from behind, sending them both crashing into the muddy gravel. Pain exploded in her shoulder, but Bianca fought like a feral cat, clawing at his eyes, kicking her heavy boots into his shins. She possessed a fierce, heavy strength, rolling her weight to pin his arm, driving her elbow into his throat. "You crazy bitch!" the thug choked out, throwing her off him and pulling a switchblade from his pocket. Bianca scrambled backward, hitting the side of a rusted dumpster. She was trapped. The first man, bleeding from his head, came up beside his partner, pulling a handgun. "Vogel wants you alive," he spat, wiping blood from his eyes. "But he didn't say we couldn't break your legs." Bianca lifted her chin, the rain pasting her dark hair to her face. She refused to cower. She would not beg. Suddenly, the roar of a high-performance engine shattered the storm. A matte black SUV drifted violently into the parking lot, hydroplaning across the puddles and slamming directly into the thug with the knife. The impact sent the man flying over the hood, crashing into a brick wall. The doors of the SUV burst open before the vehicle even came to a complete halt. Dante Costa stepped out into the pouring rain. He did not look like a polished Mafia boss. He looked like the devil himself. He wore no coat, his white dress shirt soaked through, his face a mask of absolute, unhinged fury. In his hand was a custom matte black pistol. The remaining thug raised his gun, but Dante was faster. 3 suppressed shots spit through the rain. The thug's knees buckled, and he collapsed into the mud, dead before he hit the ground. Dante did not even look at the bodies. He dropped the gun and fell to his knees in the gravel in front of Bianca. His chest heaved, his dark eyes scanning every inch of her, looking for blood, for injuries. His hands, usually so steady, were shaking violently as he reached out, afraid to touch her, afraid she would shatter. "Bianca," he breathed, his voice raw, stripped of all its cold authority. She looked at the man who had torn her soul apart just days prior. He was kneeling in the mud for her. "You told me I was taking up space," she whispered. Her voice trembling but defiant. Dante's face twisted in agony. He grabbed her hands, pulling them to his chest, pressing them over his racing heart. "I lied," he choked out, the ruthless Don completely shattered at her feet. "You are the only thing in this world I will ever want. And I am going to burn down whoever sent these men, and then I am going to spend the rest of my miserable life proving it to you. Please, come home." The drive back to Chicago was shrouded in a heavy, charged silence. Bianca sat in the passenger seat of the armored SUV, wrapped in Dante Costa's dry suit jacket. The luxurious fabric swallowed her completely, smelling of expensive cologne and gunpowder. Dante drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his jaw locked in a hard line. He did not ask if she was okay. He knew she was not. But every few miles, his right hand would leave the wheel, reaching across the console to grip her thigh. It was a desperate, grounding touch, as if he needed physical proof that she was really sitting beside him, that he had not lost her to the violence of his own world. When the massive iron gates of the Costa estate swung open, the entire compound was on high alert. Heavily armed guards patrolled the perimeter with assault rifles, and floodlights cut through the remaining storm. Enzo and a dozen of Dante's top men were waiting on the front steps. When Dante parked the vehicle, he did not wait for anyone to open his door. He stepped out, walked around the hood, and opened Bianca's door himself. He offered her his hand. The men watched in stunned silence. Their ruthless, untouchable Don was bowing his head to a bruised, soaking wet woman in an oversized jacket and muddy jeans. Bianca did not shrink under their stares. She took his hand, her grip firm and heavy, pulling herself out of the vehicle. As they entered the grand foyer, a small figure came hurtling down the sweeping marble staircase. "Bianca!" The word tore through the quiet house. It was the first word Leo had spoken in 6 months. The little boy crashed into her legs, sobbing hysterically. Bianca dropped to her knees, heedless of the pain in her shoulder, and gathered the boy into her arms. She buried her face in his neck, rocking him back and forth, murmuring soft, comforting promises. Dante stood above them, watching the woman who had brought life back into his desolate home. His chest ached with a profound, terrifying devotion. She was no longer just the nanny. She was the heart of the Costa Syndicate. An hour later, after Leo was asleep, and a private physician had tended to Bianca's bruised shoulder, the atmosphere in the mansion shifted from relief to impending violence. Dante convened his war council in the underground library. 10 of the most dangerous men in the Midwest sat around a long oak table. Brett Vogel crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed, Dante stated, standing at the head of the table. He sent his Detroit crew into my territory to take what is mine. We are going to sever his supply lines, burn his warehouses, and mount his head on the front gates of his own compound. I want every route in and out of Michigan locked down. Enzo shook his head slowly. Boss, Vogel is dug in deep. The Iron Hand Syndicate uses a network of ghost fronts, pawn shops, laundromats, scrapyards. If we march into Detroit blind, it will be a slaughter. We do not know where his central ledger is kept, and without cutting off his money, he will just buy more mercenaries. A quiet voice interrupted from the doorway. I know where his money is. Every head snapped toward the entrance. Bianca stood there in fresh clothes, a thick knit sweater clinging to her soft curves, her dark hair still damp from the shower. She held a mug of tea, her hazel eyes scanning the room of hardened killers without a flinch. Dante stepped forward immediately, his protective instincts flaring. Bianca, you should be ready. This is not a place for you right now. She looked directly into his eyes, refusing to back down. You told me I did not belong in your world, Dante. But your world came for me in a motel parking lot. I am in it now, whether you like it or not. Dante's jaw tightened, but a flash of dark pride ignited in his eyes. He stepped aside, offering her the floor. Bianca walked to the table, her presence commanding the room through sheer, grounded reality. I grew up on the South Side, she began, looking at Enzo. I know how bottom feeders operate. When Vogel's men found me, they didn't do it through high-tech surveillance. I pawned a gold necklace at a shop on 4th Street in Gary to pay for my room. The guy behind the counter had a distinct tattoo on his wrist, a black anvil. One of the capos cursed softly, the Iron Hand. Exactly, Bianca said. But here is the thing. When I handed him the necklace, he didn't put it in a safe. He dropped it into a pneumatic tube behind the counter. A tube system in a rundown pawn shop? That means it connects to a subterranean vault. And while I was waiting for my cash, he was on a landline complaining to someone about a delayed armored transit from the Highland Park rail yard in Detroit. He said, and I quote, "Vogel is going to skin me if the main ledger is not balanced by midnight." Silence fell over the room. Bianca had just handed them the keys to Vogel's entire empire. The men looked at her, no longer seeing a plus-sized caretaker, but a woman with sharp instincts and a heavier, deeper intelligence than any of them had realized. Enzo looked at Dante, a rare smile crossing his scarred face. I think we found our target, boss. Dante did not look at Enzo. He was staring at Bianca, entirely consumed by her. He walked over to her, entirely ignoring the 10 dangerous men watching them. He reached out, his large hand gently cupping her jaw, his thumb brushing over a small scratch on her cheek. "You are terrifying," he murmured, his voice thick with reverence. "I am a survivor," she corrected quietly. "Do what you have to do, Dante. Finish it." The war between the Costa Syndicate and the Iron Hand was brutal, bloody, and shockingly brief. Armed with Bianca's intelligence, Dante's men struck with surgical precision. They hit the Gary pawn shop, securing the subterranean vault and seizing millions in unlaundered cash. Simultaneously, Enzo led a tactical strike force into the Highland Park rail yards in Detroit, intercepting Vogel's armored transit and capturing the financial ledgers that detailed every corrupt politician and dirty cop on Vogel's payroll. Overnight, Brett Vogel went from a kingpin to a hunted animal. His allies abandoned him. His mercenaries fled. Desperation breeds fatal mistakes. Knowing his empire was collapsing and his life was forfeit, Vogel decided on one final, suicidal move. He did not run. He gathered his 3 most loyal, heavily armed enforcers and drove straight to Chicago. If he was going down, he was going to cut the heart out of Dante Costa before he died. It was 2:00 a.m. on a Thursday. Dante was away from the estate, personally overseeing the disposal of Vogel's lieutenants in the industrial district. The Costa mansion was heavily guarded, but Vogel had blueprints from an old contractor. They breached the estate through the archaic, forgotten Prohibition era smuggling tunnels beneath the wine cellar. Bianca was awake. She was restless, sitting in the dark nursery, watching Leo sleep. The sudden, muffled sound of suppressed gunfire from the floors below made her blood turn to ice. The alarms did not sound immediately. The intruders had cut the main power lines. The mansion plunged into total darkness. Bianca did not panic. She had grown up in neighborhoods where gunshots were lullabies. She quickly gathered the sleeping Leo into her arms. The boy woke up, his eyes wide with terror, but he did not scream. Bianca pressed her finger to her lips, and he nodded, clinging to her neck. She moved silently through the dark halls, heading straight for the master suite. Dante had showed her the panic room, hidden behind the mahogany bookshelves. She punched in the code, the heavy steel door sliding open. She set Leo inside, wrapping a heavy blanket around him. "Stay here, my brave boy," she whispered. "Do not make a sound until I come back." She stepped back out and let the steel door seal shut. She could have stayed inside, but she knew if they blew the door with C4, they would both die. She needed to buy time. She needed to defend the doorway. Bianca moved to the fireplace and picked up a solid iron fire poker. It was heavy, nearly 20 pounds of wrought iron. She gripped it with both hands, stepping into the shadows by the bedroom door, regulating her breathing. Her thick thighs gave her a solid, immovable center of gravity. She waited. Heavy boots crunched on the hardwood floor of the hallway. A flashlight beam swept into the bedroom. "Check the closets," a harsh, German-accented voice hissed. "Vogel, the fat bitch has to be here somewhere. If you find her, shoot her in the stomach. Let her bleed." A man stepped into the bedroom, his rifle raised, the flashlight mounted on the barrel cutting through the dark. He walked past the shadows by the door. Bianca did not hesitate. Drawing on every ounce of her heavy, solid strength, she swung the iron poker like a baseball bat. The heavy metal connected with the back of the mercenary's knees with a bone-shattering crunch. The man screamed, collapsing to the floor. Before he could raise his rifle, Bianca brought the heavy iron down squarely on his wrist, shattering it and kicking the weapon under the bed. "What the hell is going on in there?" Vogel shouted from the hallway, rushing toward the bedroom door. Suddenly, the front gates of the estate erupted in blinding light. Sirens blared, and the roaring engines of a dozen armored SUVs tore up the driveway. Dante had returned. Vogel realized he was out of time. He lunged into the bedroom, raising his pistol, but Bianca was already moving. She threw the heavy iron poker directly at his chest. It hit him hard, knocking the wind out of him and throwing his aim off. The bullet shattered the mirror above the dresser. Before Vogel could recover, the bedroom door was kicked entirely off its hinges. Dante stood in the doorway, an absolute vision of death. His suit was covered in blood, his eyes black with rage. He took one look at Vogel, then at Bianca standing defiant and unharmed in the center of the room. Dante moved faster than a human should. He crossed the room, grabbed Vogel by the throat, and slammed him into the wall with enough force to crack the plaster. He disarmed the German crime lord in a fluid second, tossing the pistol aside. "You dared to enter my home," Dante growled, his voice vibrating with demonic fury. "You dared to come near her." Vogel choked, spitting blood onto Dante's shirt. "You think she loves you, Costa? She is just a piece of trash. You are a fool for a fat pig." Dante did not shout. He did not argue. He calmly pulled a combat knife from his belt. "Apologize to my queen," Dante whispered, pressing the blade under Vogel's chin. Vogel gasped, his eyes widening in pure terror. I'm sorry." Dante's expression remained entirely blank, apology not accepted. With a brutal, fluid motion, Dante ended the threat of Brett Vogel forever. He let the body drop to the floor, turning his back on it as if it were nothing but garbage. He dropped the knife and walked toward Bianca. The adrenaline was fading, and her hands began to shake. Dante pulled her into his chest, wrapping his massive arms around her, burying his face in her hair. He held her so tightly she could barely breathe, but she did not care. She wrapped her arms around his waist, grounding him, pulling him back from the edge of his violent darkness. "I've got you," she whispered against his chest. "I'm right here." Dante pulled back slightly, framing her face with his blood-stained hands. He looked at her softly rounded cheeks, her fierce hazel eyes, her thick, beautiful body that had fought like a lioness to protect what was theirs. "No one will ever want you," he repeated his own cruel words from a lifetime ago, his voice breaking with emotion. "I was the biggest fool on this earth, Bianca, because I do not just want you. I need you. You are my strength. You are my sanity. You are the only ruler of the Costa Syndicate. Will you stay? Will you rule this city by my side?" Bianca looked at the ruthless Mafia boss, who was entirely at her mercy. A slow, confident smile spread across her face. "On one condition," she said, her tone absolute. "You never criticize my sweaters again." Dante let out a breathless, broken laugh, crashing his lips down onto hers. It was a kiss sealed in blood, smoke, and an unyielding promise. The untouchable predator had finally met his match, and the Chicago underworld would never be the same again. Did Bianca's fierce resilience and Dante's ruthless devotion keep you on the edge of your seat? If you loved this dark, gripping Mafia romance, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more high-stakes underworld tales. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought of Bianca's badass survival skills, and share this video with a friend who loves a protective Mafia boss. Don't miss out on our next thrilling story.